I'm happy to be in an Olympic city, having come from my home city, which hosted the Winter Olympics in 2010. I just want to see in the audience, even though the lights are really bright, how many of you are university students right now? Okay, how many of you are in your sort of first 10 years of your career? Okay, well, I just want to share with you that when I was doing my master's degree at the University of Calgary, thanks you guys, I was there when our city hosted the 1988 Winter Olympics. I'm a geography undergrad. I was doing my master's in marketing communications, and I saw my little provincial host city transform, and I got the bug. Soon after, I moved to Lausanne, Switzerland, where I worked for the Worldwide Fund for Nature, an international conservation organization. And I would jog, because I love to run, in Lausanne, past the International Olympic Committee head office, a beautiful building on Lake Lac Le Mans. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to work for the Olympics one day? And 16 years later, I was given a wonderful, probably one of the most interesting jobs in my career so far. I was the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Vancouver 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And it's regarded as one of the best examples of applying the sustainability lens with legacies in mind to an Olympic project. We worked close hand in hand with London, sort of younger, smaller Winter Games with larger, bigger Summer Games. And we've created a model to help the Olympic movement think about the built environment, excellent sport events, and lasting legacies. I've worked for about 25 years in the field of sustainable development, corporate social responsibility, and now the last 10 years in this sports sector. And I've gone on to help future bid and organizing committees, London 2012, Sochi 2014, Pan Am 2015 in Toronto, Istanbul 2020, the bid city for the 2020 Summer Games, which now Tokyo has won, and in Canada helping FIFA Women's World Cup, 6 cities across the country this next year, and the Pan Am Games, which of course come next year. So I'm bringing that experience to my story to you today to talk about what's involved in planning not only for excellent events, but also excellent legacies. It's still not a perfect science, but we're figuring out so many and smarter ways to deliver excellent events that make a difference in the communities long after the events have gone. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the problems and challenges that we face in this complex business. I'm going to talk about some of the solutions and what some of the early impacts are that we can see as a result of this work. It's a big year in Canada next year, and with that in mind, we're able to apply some of the lessons we've learned at home and abroad in this field. So, the challenge. We all strive for excellence. We want to do it personally in our jobs, in our lives, in our business, and certainly for our events. If we are the event owner, we want to have an excellent competition with entertainment and excitement and have an excellent experience for our athletes and for our officials and for our sponsors, our fans and media. In the sport business, increasingly, every country suffers from youth that aren't getting out and being active and are suffering from childhood obesity, poor health and diet. So how can sport events create and inspire awareness and behavior change to promote healthy living? How do we enhance our urban environment? We're discovering over and over again now that when done well, we can really help to advance urban sustainability in ways that grow our brand, make our region more attractive to tourism, and attract investment in terms of business and development in our host region. Certainly for event owners and sponsors, we want to see return on our investment. And all around and in between this, we want to garner public support where we can have that support through the rather long period of planning, from 7 to 10 years to host an Olympic or FIFA World Cup. And increasingly now, this profession, this sustainable sport event profession, means that we need to be able to demonstrate how we can do our job and have a positive or a strong track record environmentally, socially, as well as economically. There's a double challenge in this too, because not any one organization has total responsibility for the whole mega event. We've got multi-party stakeholders who have partial responsibility for some piece of the whole event. We've got incredible complexity and we've got long timelines. So it can get quite confusing and challenging to plan and communicate across many stakeholders. What we're finding now, and this is more on the management strategy governance side, is by taking a principles-based approach to governance, where we check in with our personal values about being accountable, being respectful, working as a team, being innovative, being focused on excellence in terms of time and money, that together with the broad array of stakeholder organizations we need to work with, we can set up a communication and management approach to delivering excellent events and thinking about legacies. Some of the things that have been born since the Vancouver 2010 Games are new standards and best practices around sustainable event planning and management. Starting with the Vancouver 2010 Games, we were invited to work not only nationally in Canada, but internationally to develop an international standard for sustainable event planning and management. It's called ISO 2012-1, and it's a kind of the guidebook on how to plan and manage events. So it's one part of the equation is to plan and manage events, and the other part of the equation is how do we report on and see how we're doing. So the Global Reporting Initiative, which is an internationally recognized resource for cities, projects, companies, and organizations to track their performance environmentally, economically, and socially, has created one for the event sector. So for you young students interested in this field, these are your new Bibles in terms of how to learn more about what's involved in planning for these events. I've just come back about a month ago from the IOC Sport and Environment Commission meeting in Lausanne, where the IOC and frankly FIFA in Zurich as well are looking very, very squarely at the challenges of hosting mega events and how to create a more fair and appetizing forum for bid cities to put their hands up for these very complex projects. So they're now adopting these new standards within their organizations as a way to look for opportunities to create events that are accountable, that demonstrate ethical business conduct, are accessible and safe and secure, that provide opportunities economically, environmentally, and socially in the region, that really use procurement and sourcing as a way, as a leverage point to help deliver some of these goals in these regions, to ensure an excellent event, and to inspire behavior change through fans and public both attending and viewing the event. All of this is to now think about how does the event plan deliver on legacy for the host region that will inherit this long after the Games. This is a model that we use now in our work where we think about how do we plan the event and the legacy together right from the beginning. So in that bid phase, we zoom back, we zoom ahead in time to imagine what kinds of assets and benefits we want to create in our host region, and we plan and finance and steward that in parallel to the planning of the event. We now have some guidance on how to report on legacies, and we divide them into two categories: soft legacies, so whether that's behavior change, new ways of doing business, shared knowledge, new initiatives, new best practices, as well as the formality of sharing what we've learned from previous organizing committee experiences to the next host. Hard legacies are some of the things that Greg and Michael have talked about in terms of the physical assets that we leave in the community long after the Games have left. It can also be investment funds, trust funds, financing mechanisms to promote sport and program activities in the host region. We now have track records. When we know better, we can do better. So we first need to get information that's reliable, that's comparable, and so now we have these GRI, Sustainable Event reports that we can look to compare from Olympic Games or World Cup Games to World Cup Games, what the record has been. Also at these meetings that I was just at in Switzerland, there is now a push to increase the timeline for post-event reporting. Not just after the event, but 2 to 5 years after the event. So we can start to understand what is the impact of our mega events in regions long after they're gone. When I talk about stakeholders, and that's an important part of the business of sustainability and legacy planning, we mean everybody that is moved or touched or affected by the mega event coming into their town or city. And whether that's the rights holder or the government partners or the suppliers and sponsors or the local community organizations or residents and businesses, Media and critics, they're important to include as well as our workforce. We need to have a conversation with them to understand what are the priorities that matter to them. Sustainability means different things to different people, and it's through those conversations we understand those specific priorities. There's a term used in this work called understanding your materiality. What are the specific significant priorities that stakeholders are saying that are vital to them? This is just a visual map of an engagement session we did in Prince George, Northern British Columbia for Canada Winter Games, where we understood where we got a sense of what their priorities would be. So that would then drive our strategic plan for the Canada Winter Games 2015. It's an important lens to gauge feedback, to understand what the critical issues are that we're going to need to monitor through time. It can also be the lens by which we get either a go or a no-go, support for an event or not support for an event. And we've seen a few casualties in the 2022 bid cities for the Winter Games, including Krakow, Oslo, and Stockholm. For a variety of reasons, we weren't able to get that support to move the agenda forward. I'm just sharing this slide with you because it shows that not only are we concerned about being on time and on budget in terms of hosting an excellent Olympic or FIFA World Cup, but we also have objectives that are vital to the host region, that the event organizer is very critically involved in helping to manifest or help to deliver. We've got interesting things, not only like environmental stewardship, but also things like community involvement, social development, social inclusion, human rights, Aboriginal participation. These are some of these strategic objectives we might not have typically imagined would be involved in our day job of delivering an Olympic or World Cup event. Some of the innovations that we've seen from the Vancouver and London and also now Toronto Pan Am organizing committees has been really using the big lever of sourcing and purchasing and licensing to ensure that we are gathering and garnering materials, products, supplies, and services that are going to support what we need for the Games or the World Cup, but that are also sourced in a way where we're respecting laws, environmental requirements, human rights of those that are involved in the supply chain, and that we can track and report it. We're going to see terrific success with the Pan Am Games in terms of social inclusion and diversity in their sourcing. I think it's going to pop up as one of the next best practices in terms of sourcing in that way. It's a photo from way back when we had our own Winter Olympics in Vancouver. It's one of my favorite venues, and it's to Greg's point around how do we design venues that make sense for the long term. This is the Richmond Olympic Oval. It was the 2,000-meter long track speed skating venue for the Games. It was an interesting venue. It was located in a city that needed a community center after the Games were finished. This venue has 1.1 million board feet of pine beetle affected wood. In northern Canada, we don't have our winters cold enough or long enough anymore such that we have pine beetle affected wood. The architects were thoughtful in the design of the roof of the venue, and we were able to use this wood. It's beautiful, it's structurally sound, as a product into creating this venue. The venue is multi-purpose. It's now used for hockey, rugby, basketball. It's got a high-performance training center for our national rowing team, meeting and convening space. So this now is a community asset that's form and function is resilient and flexible to what we need in the local, it's the city of Richmond, which is just beside Vancouver. For our two athlete villages in Vancouver and in Whistler, we, part of the design incorporated our commitment to be low carbon and as energy efficient as possible. So we took the waste heat from the wastewater treatment plant in Vancouver and in Whistler and created a neighborhood energy utility that provides the heating and cooling energy for what was the athlete village, which is now a multi-housing project development in our city. I've talked a little bit about financing mechanisms, and I'm going to scoop some from Vancouver and London in 2012 to share with you this whole role of sponsor activations. Sponsors not only provide a huge amount of cash and money to help associate their brand with the event, but they also invest money in what they call activations, which when you have a similar goalpost around low footprint games or socially inclusive games or innovative games with Aboriginal or Indigenous people, sponsors look at their corporate social responsibility agenda and seek opportunities to align with that in terms of how they associate and show up with the Games. An example would be the medal here on the left, the metal sponsor was from a mining company called Teck Resources. And rather than just using resources that were originally sourced from the ground, they also had metal that was recycled, what we call urban ore. So recycled metal from cell phones, computers, and whatnot. And that was an input into the metal to make the medals that was then done in partnership with our Royal Canadian Mint, which designed these. The woman on the right is part of our Aboriginal or Indigenous Peoples program, where original Aboriginal artists created patterns and gifts and items that would then be used for retail as gifts and for resale through the Games project. And a percentage of that revenue from these licensed products became an input into the Aboriginal youth sport program in Canada, and that still perpetuates. Product innovation, Kemp gave us some really great examples of Coca-Cola. Coke has been a sponsor for the Olympic Games, in particular in this regard, for over 90 years now. They've created a partnership starting since the Beijing 2008 Games with WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature, to create a real investigation looking at how they could be more efficient in terms of energy, water, and waste. And really, like many sponsors, they use the Games as a stage or as a platform to showcase their new products and innovation, given the enormous publicity and profile that comes. In our Vancouver Games, we started a project that I think is relevant to this audience around how do you attract innovation by all these strange partners, whether you're government partners or suppliers and sponsors. And we created an icon, this star with two people in it, called it the Sustainability Star Program. We created a jury that would be made available to review applications by sponsors and partners on games-related innovations that applied at least two of the three legs of sustainability. So an innovation that had an environmental, social, and economic benefit, two of those three. They applied over a year to be able to use this mark, and then they could use it in their marketing, communications, and branding in the lead up and during the Games. We ended up having 62 Games-related sustainability innovations as a result of that program. We've seen product innovation certainly continue on and flourish with other games. A couple of fun examples is with 3M that did the building wrap in our downtown city, Vancouver. That wrap then gets taken off the building after the Games and gets recycled as floor tiling as a second product use. We certainly see this with automotive sponsors and others with future Games. Toronto Pan Am is going to enjoy the Chevy Electric Volt as part of their vehicle fleet, and London 2012 enjoyed BMW and with their innovations on high recyclability and energy efficiency in theirs. I want to talk about some of the social benefits that can be created through these strange partnerships. This was launched in Vancouver, and it would continue on into London, where public-private partnerships between, in our case, a sponsor, Rona, which created some of the building supplies for our overlay, did a partnership with an inner-city social NGO and a government partner that provided training dollars. We ended up creating a program that ran over a total of 30 weeks, where young adults, new immigrants, at-risk young youth looking for viable trade opportunities were educated in basic carpentry, and they were learning math, turning up on time, learning the skills of carpentry that would help make the podiums, platforms, ramps, and things that we would need for the Games. So a soft legacy would be the new skill sets and jobs that would be generated as for these people as a result of that. In addition, we did a joint venture between a small social enterprise and a large florist. Every Games gives flowers to successful athletes on the podium, and this contract, again, was put together through our sourcing program, such that a social enterprise that helps women who have just come out of abusive relationships or out of jail and want to re-enter the marketplace could work with a larger enterprise to learn the skill to make the product that we would then use for the Games. These are small numbers, but these are in terms of economic return on investment, but they have high human value, and they were some of the most cherished stories that were sought out during the Games in 2010. Operating trusts are another financial vehicle that early in the planning cycle, money is set aside to grow, hopefully, if you've got good economic times, to help finance the first couple of years after the games are finished. And we've seen that pretty well in every Olympic project. In Vancouver and Whistler, where we had our mountain venues, our Whistler Olympic Park, which has ski jumping, cross-country skiing, and biathlon, is not only an elite training venue for athletes, but also training grounds for young men and women who want to get into these sports. The Aboriginal Youth Sport Program flourished. 5% of our Canadian population come from Indigenous backgrounds. They're from the most socially some of the most socially challenged communities in our country. So there was a real focus to create benefits for our Indigenous and Aboriginal people through our Vancouver project. This project has now blossomed, where we have not only the First Nations snowboarding team that has now grown from our own host province to across the country, but also with FIFA Women's World Cup, the Football for Hope program, which FIFA brings with the host country, a program that really is targeting girls of Aboriginal origin in the sport of soccer. Certainly, we've seen other hard legacies, things like transportation infrastructure. Certainly in Vancouver, we've enjoyed this, as well as London, to connect the downtown London to the River Lee and East London. And these are legacies that create much more, or great opportunity for accessibility, affordable transportation, accessible transportation. In Vancouver alone, we've seen a 35% modal shift as a result of our new transit system for that. Michael's already talked about much of the work that an Olympic or a FIFA project can take on, where we can take a contaminated or a forlorn site and improve it to make it become a community asset through a series of revitalization efforts. Certainly in these cities, and smaller cities like Vancouver, bigger cities like London and Toronto, we're seeing the stage of the games being an opportunity to really come out in our new, more modern brand. And certainly in Vancouver, our brand is under the title Green Capital, so we're a livable city that invites green and socially responsible investment, and that was really the target of our mayor during Games time in terms of selling the city to the international audience. I'm going to close by saying that there's a million pieces. There's so many stakeholders that are involved in hosting great and fantastic events. From a fan and an athlete, we really would just want to see an excellent sport event. For the people behind the scenes who aren't athletes but have had an opportunity to be part of a major project, to have those values put to play is really remarkable. And now we're seeing, as a result of this, if we can demonstrate and if we can help deliver a lens that allows for this leadership and focus, not just on the event, but also on the legacies, we're able to unlock barriers in maybe ways we hadn't thought before. We can certainly fast-track urban renewal, and we can establish some of these structures and financing mechanisms and decision-making mechanisms to support legacies after the games have long passed. And we can really help to advance a social and green agenda that pretty well any city on the planet will have in some way, shape, or form. And a major project like this has the ability to really expedite that. So I'll close with that for now. And thank you very much.